Contortionist disease. I'm on my fourth train today. Currently the last train till I reach my childhood home on the Outer Banks of England. Sandy Cove. It's a fitting name actually, as there's no sand and certainly no coves. My mother keeps me on a call the whole time just to make sure I made it safely. I think she's more cautious than usual as I'm coming back to help around the house. My grandma isn't very well, you see, and she's staying with my parents whilst she recovers, but it seems more like she's staying to make her last few days count. Nevertheless, I don't mind the company of my mother, especially when it gets later in the day. It seems weirdos and crackheads of the night assume you're on the phone to your overprotective, next stop, 6'5" boyfriend who just finished his sentence for attempted murder. When I finally made it, I had been on my own as the phone call cut out half an hour before I arrived. I was supposed to meet my family at the station, but they weren't there. In fact, no one was. It felt almost sickening and unnatural emptiness. It was the middle of December, so you could imagine that I wouldn't want to stick around the freezing cold and quite unnerving building I hadn't been in since I left for uni. I assumed that maybe they forgot what time I arrived, or they even drifted off to sleep on the couch with late-night reruns of Pointless playing over. These thoughts eased my very easily agitated anxiety as I approached the town. The walk from the station to the town was long, but not because it's far away, but because the town is in a hole. To get up and down you have to use this thin, spiral natural path that narrowly goes down. The town was sinking. It was breathtaking. I was half horrified but equally half mesmerized with its natural beauty. Since I left, it had drastically sunk lower into the ground. I didn't believe my parents when they told me, but when I finally saw it with my own eyes, I was breathless. Overlooking the town, it started to dawn on me that the town was strangely lit up. The closer I got to the ground, the more I could make out. Flashlights bobbing in the distance, floodlights over the pond, and empty houses with their lights still left on. Even though all the signs pointed towards something being wrong, I had to go find my parents, so I continued towards their house. The town is very claustrophobic as all the houses are built close together. Too close together. I was near the house and luckily I caught my parents just leaving. "Honey." My mum cries out with her arms wide open, running to me. She apologizes and explains that Gran seems to have wandered again, but this time we can't find her anywhere. One thing I didn't mention before was how my grandma had started to experience early symptoms of Alzheimer's. I wasn't aware that it got to this point. Me and my parents barely dived deeper than surface level conversation, so they never explained how it had gotten so bad. We end our reunion quickly as we all try to look around the town for her. It's just me, my dad and mother. I'm an only child with no other family members, and we are all my grandma has. We looked where she apparently would usually go. My mother explained these different spots like the bus stop outside the Premier shop and how she would attempt to ride the bus all the way to Spain to get away. Hope was running very thin. Not only was this true with me, but everyone seemed to be burdened by this truth too. The last place was the lake, and we watched as the locals and the only handful of police officers in the town scout for her body. I felt awful. My mum and dad sat on the bench, and I couldn't stomach hearing my mother's whimpers any longer. I thought it was best to go back home and wait for my parents then. When I got down my street again, I noticed the door was left open, something we did not forget to close. I slowly entered the home, which before I tell this next part, must say about what the house's layout is. Firstly, entering my house will greet you with carpeted stairs up to the first floor. This dimly lit hall was a tight squeeze to get up, and so the rooms it led to were just my parents' room, my room, and the kitchen. And so when I opened the door I saw someone. They were at the top of the stairs facing the other way. At first I thought I walked in on an intruder breaking in, so I slowly backed away until I noticed who it was. It was Grandma. She was standing, quivering. The first thing I did was run up and call out to her. She spoke to me when I was halfway up the steps, and so I stopped. She told me to get her medicine. She said it hurts. My bones hurt. I can feel them growing. Urging me to hurry, I ran down to the medicine cabinet. I was in such a rush I forgot to ask what I would be looking for. But strangely enough, before I could ask, the whole cupboard was full of the same pill bottles. They were all nameless? To make sure I called out to my grandma. "Which one is it?" "They're all the same. They are all for our bones. Please. Hurry." I grabbed one as the empty bottles cluttered to the floor. I didn't have time to clean. I could hear my grandma groaning in pain. She still was in the same position as when I left her. Standing, shaking as she faced away from me. She lifted her hand, palms open, as she expected the bottle to be placed in her hand. I complied as I put in her grasp. It was like a fly going into a Venus flytrap. Her fingers curled over the bottle and she carefully opened the lid. Calmly, pill by pill, she swallowed each one. It must have been 30 or maybe even 40. I stepped backwards, watching her gently guzzle the medicine like she's eating snails in France. Realizing it was probably best for me to get my parents over, I told her to stay where she is as I call Mom and Dad. Their ringtone echoes through the house as my first instinct kicks in to shout for them from the house. I stayed by the door to make sure Grandma stayed where she was and to try and call for anyone to get my parents' attention. That's when I heard it. A thud comes from within the house. My heart spiked in speed, my stomach dropped and my throat went dry. Dread kept me away from the door like sinking into slow sand. Finally I put my hand on the dirty golden door handle and tense up as I open the door. I call out for my grandma and I'm cut off when I hit something with the door. I try it again with the assumption it's stuck on the carpet until I decide to look down. Jamming the door is my grandma's head in between the gap. Her neck extended beyond the door. Our eyes met and she had a face of euphoria. Eyes way back into her sockets, she smiled and like a snail slowly slugged her head back behind the door. I opened the door to see my grandma still at the top of the stairs. Her head halfway down retracted back to her, carelessly hitting each step on the way up. Once my parents came back to the house, accompanied by the local doctors, they took my grandma to her bed. Motionless she was, but still alive. I didn't even know how to tell my parents what I saw, but I have seen too many horror movies to know I shouldn't keep it to myself. I tried my very best to be level-headed and not to look frantic when I told them about how Grandma's head seemed to elongate like some sort of yo-yo or tape measure. To my shock they chuckled, seemingly to brush away my concerns. They snarked to each other about how they could be so silly to forget to tell me. "Sorry darling, it went completely over our heads." My mum started. Dad, finishing my sentence, said with a smile, "You see, we have been feeling a lot of pain recently, and to counteract it, the local doctor, Dr. Stevens, found a new concoction of medicines that help us. The side effects of these drugs can sometimes be scary, at first, but they are completely harmless." Taking turns, my parents went back and forth, finishing each other's sentences with ease. They talked me through how recently the whole town has had similar ailments and so everyone is on this new drug. And now I stay here in this house. As I write this, alone in my childhood room, I hear nothing from my grandma's room. Occasionally I'll hear a soft thump and my dad or mother goes in to help readjust. This though plagues me. My grandma's head slumping and softly slinking to the floor. Stretched from the bed waiting for it to be propped back into bed. Her wrinkly skin flattened out like clothes on an ironing board. When everyone lay asleep I am left with a choice. I let my grandma's head stay upside down on the floor, listening to her groans of pain and cracks come from her neck. Or I am faced with seeing the horrors this drug has made. Witness again how otherworldly someone who used to take care of me when my parents couldn't. On my sick days taking me to the local pond. Now she lays in bed, drugged up on morphine, slurring words for help as her head droops down past her bed. I cannot sleep.